now, and I remembered, and now I'm going to turn it over to Susan. So you should wait, you have to unmute first.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Susan Yingling. I serve on the Akron Summit Council on Holocaust and Genocide Education, and on its behalf, I'd like to welcome and thank each of you for your attendance during this virtual seminar. I am a novice, you are not, so please bear with me. Today, as we continue to be students to better serve our own, we'll be exploring the question, what does the Holocaust teach us about opposing hatred and cruelty? Dr. Tim Mernon is an associate professor in the School of Teaching and Learning at Bowling Green and current president of the Ohio Council on Holocaust and Genocide Education. Dr. Mernon was project coordinator of Walking Witness, a Fulbright Hays funded program during which educators traveled to Poland, Hungary, and Greece, researching the lives and following in the footsteps of 6 Toledo area Holocaust survivors. At Bowling Green, Dr. Mernon engages his learners by using survivors' eyewitness narratives, historical nonfiction texts, digital media, as well as children's and young adult literature. Today, he'll help us frame Holocaust education as a call to action, using lessons of the Holocaust to bring to bear current issues in the students' own communities. Please join me in virtually welcoming Dr. Tim Mernon. Guess we give him a little applause. Thank you. Dr. Mernon.
Better unmute. So can you all hear me? Give me a thumbs up or a virtual thumbs up. I don't see the little thumbs up thing down across the bottom. I don't know. That's all right. Don't worry about it. It's nice to meet you all-ish. I'm going to dive right in. I think Susan's introduction is really good. I will also add that I am a former high school English teacher. So I'm like lots of you, it might be social studies teachers or English teachers or art teachers or all across the board. You're coming at this from some different kinds of angles. And so I very much think about school teachers and how they engage students in this process. I'm going to start to share my screen, and so you'll get to see the chaos of all the tabs across the top of my computer, because I'm doing like 17 different things at once. And then I'll go into sort of presentation mode. We'll see how this works. Okay, give me a thumbs up if you can see my PowerPoint and probably see me in the corner or see a bunch of us in the corner or whatever. And then what happens is that I lose the chat feature of, so Claire or somebody, I assume that you all will monitor the chat feature. So maybe I'll throw it over here on my side screen in case I need to respond to it. Okay, I figured that out. All right, I better stay right here. Okay, so as I was introduced, so again, if you're trying to figure out who I am, my name is Tim Mernon. It's that my last name is not pronounced in any fancy kind of way. I tell my students, in the fall, the leaves are turning, and if you've come to my class, you better be ready to do some learning. Tim Mernon, so that's me. This is a great opportunity. I'm really thankful to be here, and we'll dive in. I took the question that you all are exploring, I flipped it into a kind of a statement, but it's not really that I have all the answers to what the Holocaust teaches us about opposing hatred and cruelty. I want to throw some things out, and I want to go on a little journey with you for the next 30 minutes and see where we get, all right? I'm going to put you to work a little bit, all right? So I want to start with you. Starting points are really important for me. This wonky piece of art that my daughter designed, and we couldn't find a place to put it, so it ended up on the wall behind me, is actually, it's a metaphor that I'm going to use. So I want to pick a starting point, and I want to start with you. I want to begin with ourselves. For just 2 minutes, I want you to write about who you are and why you're here, why you teach about the Holocaust, why you want to know more, what brought you to this meeting today at 4 o'clock. Grab a piece of paper, type on your screen, pad of sticky note paper, and just some bullet points. This is for you alone. No one else is going to see this. So I'm going to mute myself for a minute, and then we'll talk. And if you want to drop one bullet point in the chat, that would be great too. You don't have to. Okay, I'm unmuting, and you can continue to jot some ideas down. If you want to put anything in the chat, I'd be interested to see what your rationale was. But I'm just going to keep moving on, all right? So here we go. Let's see if this clicks forward. So maybe you're Jewish. Maybe you're a child of a survivor. This is personal for you. Maybe you're not Jewish at all. Maybe you teach social studies, maybe English, maybe art, maybe you were a docent, maybe you did this for years and you're retired. Maybe you feel, you know, I know so little about the Holocaust. I wasn't there. I didn't live through that time and that place. I cannot know what these people experienced. How can I teach this? Maybe you feel, you know, I know a great deal about the Holocaust, but how do I get young people to care about this thing that seems like ancient history to them? What does the Holocaust have to do with us today, and what can we learn from it? I want to begin there because I think sometimes the pressure is on us that if we teach about the Holocaust, we have to begin from the beginning. We have to start with some sort of timeline. We have to start with September 1st, 1939, when the Nazis invade Poland, or we have to start. Some history teachers, and you history teachers could chime in at some point, feel as if to start to talk about the Holocaust, they have to begin at the end of World War I with the Treaty of Versailles and the chaos that happened afterwards. And those are those kind of things, right? When we keep moving, you know, if this was a timeline running through my dot here, we keep having to sort of move back and back and back in a timeline to begin to talk about this. Then this is where teenagers, you know, sort of brains roll back in their heads and they give up and they get lost. So this is one of the things that's very important to me. I'm very interested in where we begin. And I think we can begin quite simply from a nice, simple center point. I think you can pick almost any event, any Holocaust survivors narrative, any document, and just begin there. And we're going to peel back the layers of history. We're going to do what I call sort of teaching from the inside out. And I'm still sort of working out this metaphor, but you can play around with me on it. You're going to see that sort of water drop, concentric ring sort of metaphor worked a little bit. So I think we start where you are. You don't have to know everything about the Holocaust. I promise you, there are people who know more about this than you do or I do. And there's always more to learn, but there will be guides along the journey. I encourage you to think of it as a journey, to take this journey with your students. If you're going to have your students ask questions and do inquiry and do any kind of research, if you're going to have them do some sort of project at the end of all of this, then they're going on a little bit of a journey. They're going to have to climb outward and inward on this journey. And I'm suggesting that you go along with them. You don't have to know everything. This is just something I was jotting down as I was trying to put this all together. You know, studying the Holocaust it's a journey outward. It's a journey out beyond myself beyond my culture, beyond my time zone, right? Metaphorically, my 21st century time that I live in now, and beyond my comfort zone. And pardon my little footprint metaphors, but I'm having a little fun with my PowerPoint. But at the same time, it's a journey inward. It's a journey to sift through my own values, to challenge my own worldview, to question my own assumptions, to know myself more clearly, and ultimately to decide what I will do with what I now know. And so we begin with ourselves. We begin with the questions that we have, with what little we know, and we move outward from that. So what does that look like? How does that function? I want to give you a kind of a structure that I've been toying with. And I call it sort of 6 principles for teaching the Holocaust. And it's absolutely simple. You may look at it and go, there's nothing new here. But I want to climb into each one of these a little bit and work the Holocaust from some of these angles. So start local, make it personal, step outside your bubble, ask hard questions, use media responsibly, and act, create, and engage. There, I'm done. No, I'm just kidding. If you want this PowerPoint, I will give you a link to it before we're done, and I can also give you a PDF version of this. So feel free to take notes and jot some ideas, but don't feel like you have to hold all this in your head. Happy to give this to you at the end. Start local, and notice these are 6 things that seem to be pulled apart. And I think what's really happening for me and my experience of this, and the experience of others that I see working this, is that these things are happening simultaneously. That these 6 pieces are really starting simultaneously. So where do we begin? Start local. So I'm going to start a local from me. I want you to think about starting local. And I know I'm an English teacher, I should say start locally and end with an adverb, but I'm seeing little head nods from Carol and some others, but it's okay, Carol, I'm being kind of metaphoric here. Start local. Start with a location, right? Start with a place, a time and a place. So what I'm going to give you, I'm not usually one of these PowerPoint people that fly things in little by little, but for this one, I felt like there are certain slides where if I put the whole slide up, it's a little overwhelming. So this is a big slide. There's a lot of stuff on this slide. Not yet, but I want to phase it in if you're with me. Start local, okay? So begin with local history is one way to think about this. Introduce students to local survivors, share their stories, and explore the implications of their stories. So these are 3 survivors from the work that we did in Toledo, Ohio. And I know you all have your own survivors in the Cleveland, Canton, Akron, Youngstown area. You've got all kinds of folks over in your part of the state. Al Negrin was a Greek Jew. He was a college student. That's my stuff's popping up. Philip Markowitz was a 15-year-old kid when all of this began, and ended up having to sort of watch out for his brother, protect his brother through Auschwitz and several camps. Bill Leons was a little kid who was separated from his parents, was given to other folks and lived most of his time in an attic in Rotterdam. Each one of these, I've loaded this PowerPoint. If you see a blue thing, there's a link. So Bearing Witness Toledo is more detail about our project. The blue link to anti-Semitism we'll get to, but each one of these images, if you hover over it when you get my PowerPoint, there's a little video clip of Al. And if I had time, and I know I'm not going to have time, so I want to show you the structure of how I'm thinking about this, because I want you to think about what you're doing. But if you had time, Al has a story. There's one little, it's just a little 1.5-minute story, and I could start there. I could start with that point, and we could work outward from that story. We could ask questions about what was going on in Greece culturally that made that story happen the way that story happened, and what happens as a result of that. Philip has an amazing story about a sandwich that saved his life, and you can click right there and you can get his story. So this is what I'm talking about. Move outward from those survivor stories to understand the larger issues of the Holocaust. I don't think you need to begin with the Treaty of Versailles. Begin with Al Negrin, or begin with Philip Markowitz, or begin with somebody, a local story, a 1.5-minute video clip maybe, or an artifact, or a something, and then let the kids talk about it and ask questions about it and wonder about what led to it. What were the things that happened beforehand that led to this moment? And what are the implications afterwards? So we move outward like that stone hitting a pond, and we follow those ripples outward from those survivor stories to understand what led up to it, and also what happens as a result of that. And that's kind of what I'm talking about when I say teaching history from the inside out. When you do this, you get to all the sort of big bullet points that we need to hit when we teach the Holocaust. We need to understand anti-Semitism. We need to understand, why did the Nazis hate the Jews? Well, one of the things we find out is that the Nazis didn't invent hating the Jews. There's a long history of it. If you click here, you get Esther Hexter's document that she's created for you on the sort of history of anti-Semitism. And this is what I mean by work outward through history, but also you're working inward. It is a journey inward, because one of the things that you find is that anti-Semitism, that the term ghetto ghettos were invented by, the Pope in Venice in the 1500s. That anti-Semitism goes back to, so one of the things for me growing up Catholic, not Jewish, is that I get to climb into my own culture a little bit, and I get to sort of face the reality that some of this anti-Semitism is hardwired into the deep structure of my culture. I don't think I grew up hating Jews, but I realized that Jew hating is hardwired into Catholic culture. That's a really weird thing for me to discover. It's really important. So you're working outward through history, but you're also working inward. This is a very personal journey, because you find that these things then bump up against your worldview, your culture, your mindset. But doing this, we hit these major bullet points. Anti-Semitism. We realize how the Nazis redefined citizenship for Jews. They tried to deport Jews. The Jews were caught in an immigration trap. Those words might trigger some thinking about current day events. We might be thinking about how we define someone's citizenship, and what happens when we deport people, and what happens when people are stuck and can't get into and out of countries. And we hit all of these major bullet points of things that we study when we study the Holocaust by starting with a single story and working outward to other pieces. We learn who perpetrators were, victims were, bystanders. And if this is a new term for you, I've spent a lot of time with my teachers and my students exploring this idea of an upstander, and I want to hit that before we're done here. I'm watching my time because I'm only on slide 1. Anyway, I'm going to keep going. I want to look at Bill Lanz. Not only does this moment in time ask us to work backward and understand the culture, but it might ask us to work forward. So Bill Lanz, when he was finally reunited with his mother, came to the United States in the 1950s, grew up in Brooklyn in the United States in the 1950s, and also saw what was happening all across the country, and was very aware of how African Americans were oppressed in the United States. He becomes a college student at UCLA, an anthropology doctoral student. He actually becomes a college professor. And in the summer of 1961, Bill Lanz decides to be one of the Freedom Riders. So, we just watched John Lewis's death and some conversations about John Lewis. John Lewis was one of those first Freedom Riders on that first bus. Bill Lanz was a couple months behind, maybe a month behind, a few bus rides behind. And I'll show you the two pictures side by side before we're done. But Bill Lanz becomes a civil rights activist in 1961 because of the Holocaust, and he tells a story. So the story I have for Bill is here. If you click on this, you'll get a video clip of Bill explaining back in 1961 why he decided to join. The interviewer says, listen, you're obviously not African American. What's your issue here? It's not about race. And he says, well, and then he explains how his mother was beaten by German soldiers. And when he came to the United States, he saw the same thing happening in the US. And that became the catalyst for Bill to get involved. So I want us to think about our question that we begin with, which is how does this study, right, How does the Holocaust teach us about opposing hatred and cruelty? I'm not going to give you answers. I want you to think about what those answers are. I'm hoping that you're going to share with me what those answers are. How does the Holocaust teach us about opposing hatred and cruelty? So we can start local with our survivors, with historical stuff. We can also start local by thinking about current issues or events. We can work these things simultaneously. So as issues of anti-Semitism, any kind of othering, any kind of hatred of any kind of cultural group that arises here might trigger us to think about things that are happening in our own time period, in our own culture. So anti-Semitism, anti-Muslim acts, any kind of bias against immigrants, racism in general. And again, these terms become useful for us to think about: perpetrators, victims, bystanders, and upstanders. I want us to look at a couple of things here. Gosh, I'm keeping my eye on the time. This is a photograph of a garage door in Ohio, over in Sylvania, Ohio, my side of the state, a suburb of Toledo, in 2017. This is Austria in 1938. So we could start with today, and it triggers us to work backwards into the Holocaust. Now we need the Holocaust because we need to understand why someone would do that to a garage door in 2017. So we need to work backwards. We need to explore. We need the Holocaust to help us understand what's happening in our own backyards. I'm going to keep going. This is a kid named James Alex Fields. I have to move you all on my screen so I can see. James Alex Fields. He attended the Charlottesville rally in 2017. Hold on to him. Just keep him there. I want to look at some other things. Right in my own town of Bowling Green, Ohio, which is just, I want to backtrack to James Alex Fields. James Alex Fields is a kid from Maumee, Ohio. Again, Maumee is a suburb of Toledo, just south of Toledo, just north of me in Bowling Green. It's about 15 minutes away. But so those are important events, but there's some other things that are happening right in my own backyard. There are two Latino kids sitting in a Waffle House this past year, and we're beat up. We're just attacked. We're attacked for being Latino kids sitting in a Waffle House in my own backyard. This has become a big issue in my own community. So this is something that you obviously can begin to do with your own students, is look at what's happening in your own communities, and how does it resonate? What's happening here, and how does that ask questions about the Holocaust, and how does the Holocaust help us answer those questions here? I want to keep going. I want to clear the slate for a second, except for James Alex Fields. So again, he's a kid from Maumee, Ohio. He goes to that Charlottesville rally in 2017, but he didn't just go to that rally in 2017. James Fields is the driver of that car. Look at the license plate. There's a direct line, excuse me.
Tim, you're muted, only because I tried to let somebody in and then it accidentally shifted. So it's my fault. I apologize, but no.
Okay, I'm unmuted now. What I'm saying was there's a direct line from my backyard in Maumee, Ohio to Charlottesville and this event. Which I think is significant for if I teaching high school, I would be talking about our local community and how we are dealing with the things that we're dealing with in our local community. I gotta get anyway, this is the girl that he killed, Heather Heyer. And this was a picture that made the cover of the Washington Post at the time. I'm gonna have you read that while I make these people disappear behind her. So how does the Holocaust teach us about opposing hatred and cruelty? I'm just going to leave it as a question mark. I'm hoping that you'll have some answers. I'm moving on because I'm watching the time. Gotta get my mouse to get to the right spot here. I want to go back to this little thing right here very briefly. Happened in January of 2017. And this is what happened the next day. I want you and your students to think about these kinds of things. I want you to find these artifacts, right? These photographs. This tells a story. We could have a discussion for 20 minutes about what happens here. I'm hoping that the second picture is maybe part of that answer of what the Holocaust teaches us about opposing hatred and cruelty. So it literally is the same garage door, and this was the response. This was the answer. I'm going to move on. Make it personal. Obviously, you can see that part of the impact and part of the power for students is to make it personal. And it starts, making it personal starts by keeping it local, by starting local. But you're not going to just keep it local. You're going to have these kids move outward from there. But you can start by making it personal. What do I mean by that? Well, these kids need to understand they need to understand people. So you can start with 6 million Jews, but most kids can't hold that in their head, right? So maybe you start with 6 people. Our Holocaust, we had 6 Holocaust survivors. Or maybe you just start with one person. Meet a survivor, hear them speak, watch short video clips. Doing that accomplishes what no textbook can do. Use images like I've been doing. Use some film. Use a memoir, right? Night by Elie Wiesel. Use novels. Use children's picture books. Use art. It's not up there, but it should be. We peer, and this is a metaphor that we have from teaching children's literature. A good children's picture book can be a mirror, a window, or a doorway, right? It can reflect back to me, my own culture, and sometimes it reflects back in a way that I have to look in that mirror and see new things. It can be a window. I can peer out through that text. And obviously children's literature, novels, films, art can do all of these things too. I peer out through that text and I see into a world that I did not know before. Or it can be a doorway. It can invite me and challenge me to step through it and to climb around and to inhabit the space of that other culture on the other side of that doorway. I didn't invent that metaphor. Let's see if this works. Oh, no, come back. I do want to watch this video clip. Here, there are lots of ways to make it personal. Here's one. I did not invent this video, but before it gets rolling, I need to make sure I share my computer sound. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear this once this starts to roll. stop that before it keeps rolling. Did I lose the entire PowerPoint? Okay, we're gonna do that. I'm flying through here. If you've been to a Holocaust museum, you know the power of an artifact or a room full of artifacts. And that's a very powerful sort of a touchstone for us to think about. If we have time, we'll talk about that video and our thoughts and our feelings. It's a video that you could use with kids and open up a discussion with kids about, but I'm going to keep rolling because I'm watching the time. We need to step outside our bubble. And this is something that I've already sort of alluded to. We all live inside a bubble. I've been thinking about bubbles a lot, you know, like COVID bubbles, you know, like who you're allowed to sort of hang out with and who you're not. But I'm thinking about bigger bubbles too, right? Like we're all raised in a community or a culture. I was raised Catholic. My dad, we always teased my dad. We said, you should run for mayor, Dad. You know everybody in the city of Toledo. What we didn't realize was he knew everybody who was Catholic. I mean, we totally lived inside of our sort of Catholic bubble. I never knew anyone Jewish growing up. And many of your students simply do not know any Jews. They need to meet Jews. They need to understand Jewish culture. They need to understand Judaism. They need to first see Jews as human beings before they see them as victims. And I know these are things that lots of you have already thought about, but I think it's a great place to start. So they need to get outside. We need to get out, and our kids need to get outside of our bubble. And that means meeting people. That means encountering. It might start by encountering them through video, and then it might come from encountering them face to face. And then we need to understand the history of anti-Semitism. Even if it implicates their own culture, it's okay. They may feel hurt, but it's how growth happens. They need to understand racism and anti-racism. If I had time, I would walk you through, explore Professor Kendi's sort of terminology that he's using to talk about racism. Basically, the argument is it's not enough to not be racist. One actually has to be anti-racist, and we can talk about that if we have time. We have to break through myths and stereotypes. So it's a ripple effect. We confront history as we explore these artifacts, this discussion. We confront ourselves, and we begin to confront the origins of hatred and cruelty. We need to ask hard questions, and this is just a nice way of saying, do research, ask hard questions, do inquiry, have your students do research, ask hard, but you ask questions. So what are some questions? But explore the questions your kids will ask. What are some questions that your students ask? You might want to think about this and jot down some of the questions. Here are some that I often hear from students. Why did the Nazis hate the Jews? Why didn't the Jews just leave when they had the chance? Why didn't Jews resist? I mean, those are three big questions that if we climb into those questions, why did the Nazis hate the Jews? Well, we might go, we might discover that hating the Jews didn't start with Hitler, in 1936 or 29 or whenever. It goes back to the Inquisition, 1492. Columbus sailed the ocean blue, but at the same time, Ferdinand and Isabella and the Catholic Church instituted the Inquisition. And I always thought they were sort of sifting out who was a true believer and who wasn't. You know what they were sifting out? Muslims and Jews out of Spain. So where does hatred of the Jews? It's a long, long history. And that question of why did the Nazis hate the Jews? If we really are going to answer it, we've got to climb in. These are not easy questions to answer. Why didn't the Jews just leave? We're going to find out about the fact that Hitler tried to get them to leave, and the rest of the world didn't take them in, right? So we find out about a story like the St. Louis, and we discover that the rest of the world shares some burden for all of this. Student questions can really drive this study. It can really make it real and relevant for them. I think it makes it real for us. When we start to ask questions and we start to go find the answers to our questions, this comes alive for us, and I know it does for your students. What are questions you and your students can be asking about current events or issues that in your own community? What are some of these issues of hatred and cruelty that your students could research? So once you get into these hard questions, you could start thinking about your own communities. Here's just one. Why are so many young Black men and women dying at the hands of police officers? Or self-appointed white vigilantes. Why is that happening? Is that just a phenomenon, or is there something behind it? Uh, uh, you know, is it just happening now, or are there other cases in American history? And when we start to dig up research, we might recall Trayvon Martin, which is now almost 10 years ago. And your kids might discover Emmett Till. And Emmett Till is this is a lynching of a little kid from Chicago who went down and visited his family in the South that really launched the civil rights movement. 100 days after Emmett Till was killed, Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on the bus. And within a few years of Emmett Till, um, Harper Lee begins to write To Kill a Mockingbird. There's a number of things that happen, that happen as a result of some of these things. I'm watching my time and I'm just about out. So ask hard questions. I'm going to do this though. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this. Here's a great question, right? There's a lot of conspiracy theory out there that's been going on for years. Here's a question that's asked in the conspiracy theory micro bubble. That Jews are going to take over the world. So let's ask it. Let's turn it into a hard question. Are Jews going to take over the world? And it might make us wonder, how many Jews are there in the world? Well, I have some, so walk through some hard answers with your students. There are approximately 14 million practicing Jews in the world. About 6 million are in Israel, about 6 million are in the United States, and only about 2 million are in the rest of the world. Now you might go, 14 million Jews, that's a lot of people. What about population sizes of other world religions? Well, there are about 1.8 billion Muslims. There are about 1.3 billion Catholics. If you mash the Catholics in with the rest of the Christians, you got about 2.3 billion. There are 1.1 billion Hindus, 500 million Buddhists. Where did I get all this? I got it from a Pew study done in 2015, published in 2017. You can click the link and see for it yourself. Guess what? Jews aren't going to take over the world. They're not going to take over the world. So these are things that you can do with your kids. Ask hard questions. I want to hit these really quickly and then we'll ask some questions. Use media responsibly. I think this is one of the most powerful things we can do with kids in the 21st century. We can explore how media was used by the Nazis, right? We can explore where the Nazis got some of their ideas for their propaganda. Hint, they borrowed some of it from the United States. We can even explore some of how they got some of their ideas for creating Jews as second-class citizens, and they were really borrowing from Jim Crow ideas in the American South in the 20s and 30s. We can then explore how media is manipulated today. And there are a bunch of things then that we can do with students though too. We can have them use media in some responsible kinds of ways. Research, maybe they research evidence of social media manipulation today, like fake news. Maybe they use media to interview a Holocaust survivor or a civil rights era survivor, a kid, kids in their own communities or outside of their own bubble, African American kids or Latino kids who will give them a different perspective about the world, creating some sort of final product, maybe a documentary or a short PSA. I actually have a project if anyone wants to know more about it. So this is some of the work that we did. We had some of the kids in the Jewish community be part of the interview process for our survivors. And these are some of the multimedia projects that we created with college students as a result of some of our work. And this is the most important bullet point of all, and I know I've run over time, but do something, right? Do something with your kids. You guys are getting good stuff in the chat room and I haven't had time to look at it. Act, create, engage, do something. This is a long quote. You could take almost any sentence out of this quote and it blows me away. I swore never to be silent whenever and wherever human beings endure suffering and humiliation. He's not talking about where Jews, he's saying where human beings endure suffering and humiliation. We must, so that idea about never being silent is important. Well, why? He says we must take sides. Okay, thought we could just say everybody's okay on both sides, good people on both sides. He's saying neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. Silence encourages the tormentor, never the tormented. Sometimes we must interfere. We must act. We must do something. When human beings' lives are endangered, when human dignity is in jeopardy, national borders and sensitivities become irrelevant. And this is probably, you could just take this last line and this would do. Wherever men and women are persecuted because of their race, religion, or political views, that place must, at that moment, become the center of the universe. So here are a number of things that we can do with kids, right? We can research current issues of hate in American society, in our local communities. We can study genocides. We can interview a Holocaust survivor or a civil rights era survivor. I have the Latino organization in my community wants to do this immigrant myth project. Click on a couple links. They want me to help them. And I might, if you have students who want to work on a project, I might have a project for you. You might have kids do something as simple as track calories. I was thinking about this. Heinz Cunha wrote a book called A Liter of Soup and 60 Grams of Bread. And he basically, when we talked to Heinz Cunha in 2014, he basically said that, you know, the Auschwitz diet, for lack of a better way of talking about, was 700 calories. Now, you figure out what 700 calories is. Oh, I did this earlier. Where's my little calorie counter? A peanut butter and jelly sandwich is 350 calories. You know, a bottle of soda pop is like 2 something. That's like 2 of those, and that's so your kids, you know, they might explore just some simple things like that. Here are some other things that they can do, and these are all links that you can click on. You could think about the power of activism, of getting involved and making a difference, and getting involved in a little good trouble, maybe. This is a little thing that we've done with kids. We've explored this idea of being an upstander, right? And like there are perpetrators, victims, bystanders, but we've started to use this terminology. There were actually high school kids who invented this term, who said they didn't invent the term, but they got it in the dictionary. They said, how come the word upstander isn't in the dictionary? And they petitioned the Oxford English Dictionary and they got it in there. A person who speaks or acts in support of an individual or cause, particularly someone who intervenes on behalf of a person being attacked or bullied. That's what he just said in all those words, the upstander. And so this is a little thing that we've done with kids. We read the upstander pledge on this side. It's got this amazing famous photograph of these 4 Greek Holocaust survivors showing their tattoos on their left arm. And this is actually the Not in Our Town organization's pledge. I pledge to stand up to all forms of hate, bigotry, and bullying. I will not stay silent in the face of intolerance. Based on race, ethnicity, sexuality, gender, religion, ability, or any other factor, I'll work together with my neighbors to create safer, more inclusive communities. And if the kids want to sign it, they can sign it. On the other side, we give them a little pledge. I pledge to be an upstander by, and the kids can decide what they'll do. Maybe it's something simple. Maybe it's reading about this or researching this or talking to somebody else in their neighborhood or doing something else. You and your kids can decide. If you're interested in this thing, you can steal it, you can adapt it, you can click on the link, and then you can actually download it. I've gone on too long. I know I've run out of time, but a lot of this is hardwired into Jewish culture too, right? This idea of tikkun olam, right? Of repairing the world, that we are called and we're challenged to sort of be the difference, right? And it's not, and when we start to look at it, it's not just hardwired into the Jewish culture, but it's hardwired into our Christian culture and our Hindu culture and our whatever. So you've got lots of questions for me. I have my question for you is, so what does Holocaust teach us about opposing hatred and cruelty? I've gone on 8 minutes too long, and I apologize, but this is your chance to ask me some questions, I guess. So I'm gonna stop sharing, and we can talk. And I'm gonna read all the things in the chat that I didn't get time to read. Yep, go ahead.
Do you want me to give you the first question or do you need a minute?
No, go ahead, give me the first question.
Okay. How can teachers best address current current hate issues without invoking fear in their students?
Yeah, and so does somebody want to talk specifically about that? Do you want to contextualize that a little bit? I might throw the question back at whoever asked it or whoever wants to respond to that. Might be helpful to have more context. Do the question one more time, Aaron, if you don't mind.
How can teachers best address current issues, how can teachers best address current hate issues without invoking fear in their students?
I think one of the most important things is to be honest. And if you don't address it or don't even bring it up, how can you help it? So the first part to me would be opening up a discussion. And if you yourself are afraid, admit it and talk through it. I think way too often our teachers shy away from subjects because it's not comfortable for them. And that's not what it's about. It's about the students, not about us.
Yeah, that's very good. I think we need to lay some of our cards on the table with some of these kinds of things. I think we help them sift through some of this stuff. We don't necessarily, get too political about any of this stuff or get too specific, but I think one of the things that we need to recognize is if there's some sort of tension that's happening in our community, we need to help step forward and start to look at that and help be a role model for kids in terms of sifting it out. Again, a piece of literature, I can think of English teachers who have used this as a kind of a metaphor while teaching To Kill a Mockingbird, to say to students, who are the Atticus Finches in this school community and who are the mockingbirds? So it might be that we use some language that's kind of neutral, it's kind of safe, it's kind of hardwired into the work that we've been doing. You could say, who are the perpetrators and who are the upstanders? Or who are the victims and who are the upstanders? Or I could say, who are the Atticus Finches in our community? And who are the mockingbirds? And it might take kids a little bit of time to start to work that out, but we might start to explore we might have a language for thinking about who's been victimized, who's voiceless in all of this, and who is somebody who stands up for these people, and what are the issues, and then we begin to climb in and we look at them and explore them. I don't know that I have any brilliant answers for you. Somebody else throw another question. Let's get a question out. Claire or Aaron got a question?
Do you think media affects hate? In what manner?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously all of these tools can be used or misused or abused or whatever. So media is really, really powerful, but it has the power to just be absolutely destructive. So I don't think we run away from media. I think we teach. That's why I think we teach kids to use media responsibly. They have to learn how to do this. Partly because, in my perspective, I'm coming as a literacy professor, right? So part of how, literacy isn't just the ability to read or write. Literacy is how we construct meaning of the world around us through language, through sign and symbol systems. And in the 21st century, that literacy, how we construct meaning, happens in this 21st century. It's not just black ink on white paper. It's all of this stuff simultaneously. So we have to look at, one of the most important things we can do is teach kids how to read a text, whether that's black ink on white paper or what they see on their screens, and how to read it critically, with a critical eye. Sort of, you're asking questions. Who constructed this text? For what purposes? You might look and you might go, Myrna, you used that Holocaust video with all those, objects and all those people. That was very emotionally manipulative. You manipulated us all with that video. Yes, you could walk away feeling like that. I will say that when I watched that video, I was absolutely. I remember when I went through Auschwitz. The room that got me was the room with all the hair. There's a room in Auschwitz with just piles of hair, and over on this little table was this little like a one ponytail, all nicely braided, this little blonde hair, and it was exactly like my own oldest daughter, Lily. I would meticulously braid her hair in the morning like that little blonde braid. And all I could think of is, it breaks some of these assumptions, these stereotypes we have about Jews. That Jewish kid had the exact same ponytail. That Jewish kid in 1939 or 41 had the exact same hair that my little, Anglo-Irish daughter has in 1990, whatever. So media gives us an opportunity to look at and to think critically and to ask questions. I can watch that video and I can allow it to transport me outside my own little bubble, and to empathize with a culture and a people and a time and a place. And I think that's really powerful and that's really important. But I also need to teach kids not to just be emotionally sort of triggered by the things that they see, but to sift through them and to ask hard questions. They are seeing a lot of stuff in the media. They're seeing a lot of hate. They're seeing a lot of invented, I don't want to say invented facts, because they're not invented, but they're presented as if they're facts. And these kids need help. We all need help. My oldest sister, who is a smart businesswoman, was several years ago sending me stuff that she said, "Can you believe this story that she got from Facebook?" And she forwarded it to me. And I said, Shelley, I'm not sure that that's actually true. I've done a little research on that. I think we need to research it before we hit the send button. So media is powerful, but we have to teach kids how to engage it. That's my long-winded answer. Somebody else, another question.
Let's see. What is your outlook on the current social and racial climate?
I am inspired by people who give us language to look at it and to think about it. Back in my PowerPoint, I have a link to Ibram X. Kendi. He's the author of this giant book called Stamped from the Beginning. And he's talking about African-American race issues. He's not talking about Jewish race issues. But it's a big book. You don't have to read the whole thing. But he, in the prologue, in the beginning of it, the first 11 pages, he gives us some terminology. He basically says there are three, he says there aren't just sort of racists and non-racists. He says there's actually three categories. He says there are segregationists. Those are people who believe that white people and African-American people do not belong, that Black people are a substandard culture or race or whatever, and that's how they believe. There are assimilationists. I think of a way of saying that is that those are nice white people who say, I think I can help African-Americans. If only African-Americans could just, we could help them sort of raise up their culture, and then everything would be okay. And then there's something else called an anti-racist. What Kendi says is it's not just sort of like they're a racist and then they're the good people. What he's saying is there are these three groups, and these two, the segregationists and the assimilationists, they're still operating on a racist mindset. They're still operating on a mindset that there's something wrong with Black people. And if only we could fix that everything would be okay. And Kendi says, right, he says, I held these racist, this is what he says at the end of that 11-page prologue. He says, I held those racist beliefs. He's basically saying there were times when I said, what the hell is wrong with Black people, about his own culture? He said, I held those racist beliefs. He said, and it only was me working on this, becoming a professor of American history, that I began to find a language and a lens to be able to think about this and to talk about this and engage my own racist viewpoints. So I'm not calling any of my kids racists. I wouldn't say, oh, you're a racist, but I would say, I would imagine that you have held at some point or another racist beliefs. I know I have. And so Kendi gives us a language. I'm actually thinking that all of this tension that's happening right now, that there are a lot of people who are really working the problem, and I think we might shift our discussion about it. In fact, I give you those 11 pages. They're sort of badly scanned because I wasn't at the university and I couldn't use my good scanner. But you can read those pages, and I'm hoping we have a new language. I'm hoping we can start a dialogue and we can think about it. And I think thinking about African-American race is not too far off from what we've been doing for years with the Holocaust, saying, listen, this is about seeing Jews as a different race. It's about seeing them as a substandard race. It's about otherizing them. It's about taking away their citizenship. It's about creating second-class citizen status for them and locking them into a kind of a Jim Crow world. And these two things run really parallel in lots of really powerful ways. I don't want to say they're the same thing, but we might find a language that helps us think about the past, that helps us think about the present, or we might find a language about the present that helps us think about the past. And this is sort of what I'm getting at with this teaching history from the inside out. I don't know if that makes any sense.
We'll do one last question if that's okay.
Yeah.
It's a little long,
Sorry
which is
if I
great.
get a
But
little long-winded.
okay.
I used to be a high school teacher and then I became a professor. So that means I say more than I need to, you know.
Oh, you're fine. No worries on the time. We'll probably all take a little less anyways. How are people anti-racist but still anti-Semitic? Think Louis Farrakhan. Sorry for mispronouncing that. Should we be taught to be anti-bigotry and not limit to an anti-racist, which would then encompass both and other hatred against anyone different from ourselves?
Yeah. So one of the things I think that's important is I think sometimes we come from a mindset that it's like Black people can't be racist. I'm going to give you permission, because Kendi, I think, gives us permission to say Black people can be racist. If you go to the Southern Poverty Law Center's website and go to their hate map, where they target, you know, they sort of across the United States, and you can go and target in on Ohio, they consider the Nation of Islam a hate group. Now, I'm not getting into the whole thing. We can kind of decide. I'm not saying Black Muslims are, you know, practice hate. I don't say that at all. But I would say that I don't think Louis Farrakhan is exempt from, I think his ideas need to be sifted through. I think lots of people who have grown up within the Nation of Islam are constantly sifting through those things. If you're teaching high school, working with high school kids, this novel, The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas, is a really interesting kind of look at a young African-American girl who, she lives in an African-American neighborhood. It's a novel, but her parents wanted her to get out of that neighborhood. So she goes to a white school across town. So she kind of lives in these two different worlds. And her father is really raised in, you know, sort of like the Black Panthers and the Nation of Islam, at the same time that he's struggles with it and sifts through it and tries to find his own identity within the things that he's taught. So he's trying to extract the best things out of the Black Panther movement and the best things out of, so they call themselves, in their house, they call themselves Chrislams, because they believe in Black Jesus and a little bit of Nation of Islam. And it's a really sweet way of thinking about this hybrid family that they live in. So I'm not going to hold Louis Farrakhan up as some ideal of whatever. I think he needs to work on his stuff, and I think we need to begin to work on our stuff. So I think Kendi would help you think about that. He would argue that African Americans are not exempt from, you know, that they can hold racist ideas too. They can struggle with this too. We are all going to struggle with this. Okay, it's 5:02. You've got only a half hour to keep going. So
Okay.
crack the
All right.
whip and stop me, Claire.
Thank you, Dr. Tim Vernon. We appreciate you taking the time to come in and speak to us about what does the Holocaust teach us about opposing hatred and cruelty. And thank you to answering most of the questions that we were able to get to you. And we appreciate you coming out. So we'll move on, and thank you so much.
While I have you,
Mhm.
I am going to put the link in the, hopefully I do this right. Yeah.
Okay.
If you want the PowerPoint, it's in my Google folder. And once you get the link, I think you'll be able to view it, pull it up, play around with it, open it
Okay.
up.
Perfect.
Keep going.
Oh, thank you so much. So we're going to move on to the resources that are available on our website, and then Mr. Vernon has given you some other resources, so that's wonderful. My name is Claire Heaston. I'm the administrator for the Akron Summit Council on Holocaust and Genocide Education. You can find our website, and I'll say that later. Two amazing Holocaust knowledgeable ladies have each created resources for all of you. Every year they have created resources and have ran the seminars. And they're wonderful and knowledgeable ladies. That is Esther Hexter and Barb White. And typically they do a whole speech on each of the subjects that they do. And this year we're gonna skip that since we're doing a different formatting. But they still were lovely and wrote them up for us so that you have access to these on our website. And I emailed them to all of you. So they, the first one is Esther Hexter, and she is a Holocaust educator, a member of the Ohio Council on Holocaust and Genocide Education. She has created an historical overview leading up to the Holocaust. This is a wonderful resource. So this 8-page outline will divide the long history of anti-Semitic hatred into religious Semitism and racial anti-Semitism. It will give you the brief look at how ideas developed, the power and use of myths, false accusations and stereotypes, and what means were used to work the public over a broad area for many years. How the Nazis took hatred of the Jews to the extreme and how this hatred spread so quickly. This outline is a great resource to present the events that led up to the Holocaust over 2,000 years, not overnight. So that, I think it's a wonderful resource to lead your students easily through all of the things leading up to the Holocaust, and in a laid out, easy to follow manner. And at the end, she cites her sources too that she used to get that. And then the other resource we have is from Barb White. She's the deputy director of the Akron Summit County Public Library. She created a selected resource list of Holocaust materials available at the Akron Summit County Public Library. So they're all free resources that you can use, and they're geared to what does the Holocaust teach us on opposing hatred and cruelty. So she followed our theme, and Barb has created fantastic resource lists for so many years for us. I can't even remember a year when she didn't create these wonderful resources for all of our teachers. And so she has categorized it into groups of resources, including books, movies, documentaries, and websites. So all kinds of resources that you can use depending on what you want your students to use. And if you're entering into the Akron Summit Holocaust Student Collaborative Project, which Rini will talk about later, these are the only resources I would recommend using. It'll make it easy for your students to make sure they're using proper resources and not false resources. There are some out there that give false Holocaust information. So I would highly recommend, if you're doing that, to use these resources only. Thank you. So thank you to Esther and Barb both for taking the time to put so much work into these, and you'll see how much work they put into these when you pull them up if you haven't already. And all of these resources, along with others, can be found at our website. That's Akron Summit Holocaust Education.org/resources. And I'll also send all this information to everybody. They should have our website and all the information I already sent, but I can resend that when I send it out. And I think that is all for me. And we'll move on to Rini.
Unmute. There. Well, I would like to add my personal thank you for all of you for having an interest in this topic and for coming, and to Tim for giving such an interesting talk today. My name's Rini Pinsky, and I'm chairman of the art portion of the Holocaust Arts and Writing Contest. And the City of Akron Holocaust commemoration first took place in the spring of 1986. And it was very, very unusual for a city to sponsor a commemoration to increase awareness of the Holocaust in the community. I think our community is very rare for that. And then believing in the importance of learning the lessons of the Holocaust in our schools, the City of Akron introduced the Arts and Writing Contest 2 years later, directed at Holocaust education in middle and high schools in Akron and the surrounding Summit County area. So this has been going on in Akron for over 30 years. The Akron Summit Council on Holocaust and Genocide Education is now a separate entity operating with the financial and technical help of Summit County Under County Executive Eileen Shapiro, the financial help of the city of Akron under Mayor Daniel Hargan, and the financial support of our general community. So our primary project is to sponsor annual Holocaust Akron Summit Holocaust Arts Writing Contest. We also plan to host an educational seminar relating to the theme of this contest each year, and this is our first attempt at that. Our hope is to silence the echoes of the Holocaust and genocide that are reverberating through conflicts and continue to plague our world and our country to this day. Recent polls have shown a lack of knowledge of the Holocaust in the younger generation and an increase in Holocaust denial. And so our mission of our council is we believe that the lessons of the Holocaust and other genocides are important because man's inhumanity to man continues to threaten world freedom. We pledge to never forget the millions of innocent victims who lost their lives and the thousands of others who aided survivors. Through education and our annual writing and arts contest, we hope to enlighten today's youth and help ensure that history will never repeat itself. So we've had many themes over the last 30 years, and as you see today, our theme this year is, what does the Holocaust teach us about opposing hatred and cruelty? So on to the contest. Due to the COVID-19, however, our contest is taking a different view, just like so many things in our community. So our approach this year is we are calling this the 2021 Akron Summit Holocaust Student Collaborative Project, because this will be a curated event by members of the council. There will not be a first, second, third place winner like we sometimes do, because we can't be calling a lot of separate judges in to do this, but a few of our committee members will curate, will choose for the art. The pieces will be chosen to be displayed as a collage in the main Akron Summit County Public Library from March 23rd to April 13th, and also on our website. So all the details for the entry were sent to you and are also on our website. Just to summarize, the art should be on 12 by 12 paper. That's like scrapbook paper size. Be related to the contest theme and can be of any media, drawing, printmaking, photography, whatever. And the rubric, the submission forms are all found on our website, and I know Claire will be sending it to you. And all the pieces will be returned to the students after April 13th. And the written pieces, which are limited to 400 words, will also be displayed at the library and on our website. And if the piece is written but yet visual, maybe it'll even be in the collage. We'll be very open to create a very compelling and hopefully a wonderful piece for people to see. So you've received all the details in your email and on the Zoom link. Claire will send it again. Everything is on our website, where you'll also find the resources that Claire referred to, and also a link to support these educational efforts through donations. That's on the website too. Students may enter on their own or through their school. We have Division 1, grades 6 to 8, and Division 2, grades 9 to 12, and they'll be curated separately. All participating teachers will receive a media resource list from which to choose educational materials for their classroom and their school. And all participants will receive a certificate, and the chosen pieces will receive a special certificate and recognition on our website. So thank you all on behalf of the Akron Summit Council on Holocaust and Genocide Education. If you have any questions, I wanted to add, if you have any questions, just refer them to Claire, and all the information for the contact will be on your email and also on the website. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mernon. As you all go back to your students, hopefully with a renewed focus, I urge you to construct curriculum that teaches the history of the Holocaust and explores how hate historically and currently impacts our society. Last year, 940 hate groups were documented nationally, with much of the activism moving online to more quickly spread agendas. 940 means an average of 18.8 per state. In Ohio, we have 31, most with podcasts that are easily accessible to the public and to our students. The lessons of the Holocaust have to be taught. Dr. Mernon said to start local, take a side, create. To me, this year's student collaborative project, almost a visual quilt, should be an impactful visual statement from many diverse community voices. In the past, during our spring commemoration ceremony, we've always honored our students in person. We're anticipating next year's event to possibly be virtual or hybrid, as far as both the commemoration and the ceremony. It's currently scheduled for April 6th, 2021 at the main downtown Akron Summit County Library, beginning at 6 p.m. We'll continue to provide updates as things change or don't change. Before we split into breakout groups, I'd like to again thank each of you for participating in this seminar. You are so important right now to your students. I'd also like to thank Esther Hexter for her historical overview of events leading up to the Holocaust, and Barb White for the selected resources available through the library, both of which can also be accessed on the Akron Summit HolocaustEducation.org website. We'd also like to acknowledge the support received by the Akron Summit County Library, the City of Akron, the County of Summit, the Jewish Community Board of Akron, our individual community supporters, our virtual techie, Aaron Katz Ford, and moderator Claire Heastan. And last but not least, a very special thank you to Dr. Mernon for your impactful, timely, introspective presentation. May your words and your message continue to resound in our hearts, our lives, and our classrooms, and may we all be good upstanders. Thank you.
Okay, so now we'll go into our breakout groups if you're sticking around. And these are just quick discussion groups. We're not going to keep you forever. You're going to do like a 30-minute breakout group unless you would like to leave before that. We have already organized those into the like what you teach, or if you're a community member. So at the bottom of your program are the breakout questions. And what I would like each group to do is just to decide on someone who will be a kind of a leader of the group, and then start with whatever questions you want to start with and get through however many you would like to get to. Just depends on discussions. I would recommend choosing 3 out of the 4 questions and then taking about 10 minutes or less on each of the questions. And I will be moderating between the groups. I'll jump through and make sure discussions are going on and see if you have any questions or any problems. And so we'll just break out into those groups now. I'm sure all of you have done a breakout session by now on these Zoom things, because everything's that way now. But if not, just let me know if you have questions. You can always use I still have the chat up, so I can always check that also. So Aaron will put us in our groups. It may take a minute. I'm not sure. I've never done this. So thank you, everyone. And if you're not staying for the breakout sessions, it was lovely to have you all here, and I really appreciate everyone for attending this virtual seminar. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put into breakout groups. They automatically close in a half an hour. So if you're still, you should get a little box up that says take you to a group. If you don't, just bear with me and we will get you a group. So, okay, open all rooms. All right, and where's my, okay. All right, Claire, if you also can look at the rooms, because we've got a, let's see, one.
Okay.
Well, all right, it'll take me a minute because apparently Google will.
Okay.
All right, let's see, this is 2.
And we only have 14 people, Erin, so
Great.
you could even open it up to all of us if you wanted to.
That will be fine. I'm just, I tried to auto-populate and clearly
Okay,
work.
I think that's fine. It's only 14. We can just all chat together. I think that would work out fine.
Oh, do we want to come back together then and just do one?
I think if with 14 of us, we might as well.
Okay, well.
If it's easier, whatever's easiest.
Okay, well, if you want to chat that to everyone, I'll figure out how to get people back.
Okay.
Oh, Erin.
Okay. Well, if everyone, can everyone
if you
hear
just
me?
Close the breakout rooms, then everyone comes back to the main room. Sorry.
I think I can see everybody. So I'll just sort of monitor this and I'll read off the question and then we can all chat up. So you can take yourself off mute if you'd like to come back in, which would be lovely. So we'll just start with the first question here. How do you engage students, community speaking against hate and cruelty during the Holocaust and currently?
Claire, can you throw that question in the chat so we can kind of
Yeah.
look at it?
Sure, I can do that.
I know
That's great.
I've got the questions somewhere, but I've got too many things.
No, that's a great idea. I'll throw all the questions in the chat and then I'll let everyone openly discuss.
Erin, if you can unmute the participants, unless they can unmute themselves.
Everybody should be able to unmute themselves and then
I threw myself back into the group too. So it was the grid.
you can
Gallery
hit
view.
the gallery
Yeah,
view.
the gallery
and the
view.
chat is working. There we go. Okay. Claire, you're on mute.
The first question, I'm sorry, is on the group chat. So if you want to reread that, if you don't have the paper in front of you, please reread that. And if you have anything to add to it.
Claire, the way that I start talking about this with my 7th graders is we read an old Rod Serling Twilight Zone called The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street. And I don't know if you guys know that episode, but it's about a group of neighbors who have been getting along for years. And there's like a UFO that goes overhead and they start accusing each other. And then they start throwing out accusations and there's all this suspicion in the neighborhood and stuff. So we talk about how instead of taking the time to learn about one another by throwing out those prejudices and those suspicions, hate started festering right there in this neighborhood. And then after the kids watch that or read that play, And then we move over into the Holocaust and read an overview, a book, an overview of the Holocaust. And we compare those two things of how it really can translate into real life. But it's just not a fictional story. That probably Rod Serling's fictional story was based maybe on events surrounding the Cold War or something like that. But it's all of that, the kind of stuff that happens in real life because of prejudices and suspicions and misinformation.
What did you say the name of that was? The monsters are due on
The
Maple
monsters,
Street?
yeah, the monsters are due on Maple Street, and it's an old Twilight Zone episode, but I found it in script form as a play, so we read it as a play. And I think it's really, really helpful. And then they make that comparison, and I'm like, well, all right, who are the monsters on Maple Street? Are they aliens? No, they're one another. They're the neighbors turning against each other. And so they realize that that's what's happening in the Holocaust. And I asked them then, you know, to become, how important it is after we read all about the Holocaust and how it all started really with words, with propaganda, with all those lies in those posters and pamphlets and brochures and stuff, that those words were so instrumental in creating this hate, and that they have to learn to be critical readers and observers of language, because you know, this generation that you're in, you're just being bombarded with information, and how you have to learn how to filter what's correct and what's lies. Because those people, those ordinary, normal, everyday next door neighbors were somehow convinced to turn against their neighbors in the Holocaust. They were people just like us. Teachers who taught their kids to hate them. Teachers that put books in their hands that taught them that the Jews were subhuman. How do you know who to trust? You have to learn how to be a critical, you have to be a critical thinker and not believe everything you see and read. And it's kind of heavy for 7th grade, but it wakes them up.
Pam, in the story, does anybody in the story figure out that they've made the mistake, or do we as reader see the kind of foolishness that they've gotten themselves? That's I assume that's.
They never learn. It really was an alien ship that landed, and the 3 aliens were like, look, we don't have to do anything to them. They do it to each other through their suspicions, through their prejudices. They generate this kind of hate. So the aliens were saying, look, this is all we have to do is flick a light switch on and off and start some suspicions, or get a car to start. We don't have to do any other interference. We just make them start being suspicious of each other. And